On today's episode of Locked On Suns, there's a lot of things you can say about the Suns' Big Three and the season that just ended, but one question you have to ask yourself as we head into the Phoenix Suns offseason, and what the people in charge will be asking themselves, is this Big Three good enough? Or at the very least, is it better than the alternative? I'll give you my answer today. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, and the host of the Just Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Tuesday morning. Feels weird to not say another Suns game day, but that is where we are. Thank you for finding us wherever you are finding us. We are free and available everywhere, including YouTube, so just hit that follow or subscribe button on your podcast platform of choice. Get an episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday, all off-season long. Become an everydayer and get locked onto the Phoenix Suns from here on out. Today's episode, guys, brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 straight to your account, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The Phoenix Suns' Big Three swung and missed this season. Hardly played together, never quite got on the same page, just got swept. I have said on social media numerous times, and I think intimated on this show, that to me, everything that will be asked about this Suns offseason is noise, except for the core question of, does Matt Ishbia believe this Big Three is good enough to win a championship? And then, of course, depending on how you answer, what do you do to get there, right? So, let's talk about if the Big Three is good enough. I'm not Matt Ishbia, but I have some thoughts. This year, this regular season, the Suns had a plus 6.7 net rating with all three of Booker, Beal, and Durant on the court together. Just about every combination of two of those guys was positive outside of Durant plus Beal. With Durant and Beal on and Booker off, the Suns were a slight negative, but we'll call it neutral. Either way, they basically statistically passed with flying colors the idea of what you should get when you put stars together on the same team, which is that across 48 minutes, you're getting winning, outscoring type of basketball, aka the point of basketball, the whole time. The Suns as a team were 26-15 when all three played. That's a 52-win pace. This year in the West, that would have been the 4th seed. Now, that's assuming 82-game health for everybody, not realistic, but nevertheless, that's the number. And they were nearly unbeatable when all three scored 20 or more, right? You think about some of the games down the stretch that we saw that happen in, and you're talking about the 2 Cavs games after the All-Star break. You're talking about the both Pelicans games, frankly. The Lakers, the win over the Lakers on that Sunday afternoon. Suns had 45 in that first quarter, plus 5 fourth quarter, which was obviously an anomaly oftentimes this season. Suns as a team, 47% from the field. And again, all three of the Big Three go for, Beal didn't play. I'm looking at the other guys. Those balanced games, as I brush past my own mistake, are exactly what made this team unbeatable. Lakers game is still a perfectly fine example because 4 guys in the starting lineup had 20-plus points, 3 guys had 7-plus assists, and actually almost 5 guys had 20-plus points. Now, you get to the playoffs. The Suns were outscored by 20 points per 100 possessions with all three of the big three on the court. You know, because those guys were out there the majority of the series. They got squashed. So, of course, that number is going to look ugly. And they end up getting outplayed, I should say, by a team with a big two in Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. Which I think does start to beg the question of, it's just not begging the question, but it is the idea that I think a lot of people believe about the modern NBA, and what you would probably offer up as a counterpoint to building a team the way the Suns have, which is, hey, in the modern NBA, there's so much talent. We are churning out basketball players from the youth level on, and this sport is so big that there are so many great players. You don't need 3 superstars. You need 2 superstars, maybe even just 1, and a bunch of awesome role players around that. High-level role players, probably an insult to even call them, but that's basically what Minnesota has, right? They have Ant, who I think you would say is really the only actually traditional superstar in the historical basketball sense of that term. Towns is a star scorer. He has been an all-star, but I don't think he's ever made an all-NBA team. Playoff success has been hit or miss. Rudy Gobert, largely a defense-first type of player, has made improvements on the offensive end, is paid, again, like an all-star. He's made all-NBA and all-star teams. Maybe you put him on that list, but the Suns losing to a team like that is, in and of itself, a perfect counterpoint of, well, that's a way you could do this. We'll have plenty of time throughout the offseason to talk about if any of that is on the table, but again, you have to establish if you think this big three is good enough and can fit together well enough to win in spite of its weaknesses. And I think that brings us to the offensive disconnect, the offensive disagreements, the offensive inconsistencies, and that has largely been, I think, where, as far as the scheme side of things goes, where the aftermath of this series and this season has gone when you're talking about the Suns, right? The Athletic article that comes out about Frank Vogel. I would even go back to that Knicks post-game where Durant is asked about Brunson dropping 50 in Footprint Center, and he talks about how they've built everything around him. He gets to do what he wants and play the way he wants, and that's really special. And that leads to the Christmas thing of Durant is unhappy and all that stuff. I think a lot of it has centered on how do we want to play offense, right? And I think if you're building a team with this particular big three, right? This is not Chris Bosh, who grew into a much better defensive player. This is not, even mid-2010 Cavs where obviously LeBron could still tap into another level defensively as he did with the block on Iguodala. This is a team that has 3 offense-first guys. It makes sense that would be where the disharmony came from. You add in a, associate head coach who was in charge of the offense and was a candidate to be the head coach and didn't get it. The head coach that did get hired being more of a defensive guy. And even the role players who I think rose to the top, whether you're talking about Allen and Nurkic or even a guy like Eric Gordon, largely being offense-first players. That had to be amazing, locked into place, and the clear strength of this team in order for them to get as far as they wanted, and it wasn't, right? So it sounds like all 3 stars want more isolation, more pick and roll. But to me, look, here's the deal. When Booker had the ball, things moved too slow. When Durant had the ball more often, he turned it over a lot. When Beal had the ball more often, he wasn't aggressive enough. Neither guy, to me, was, with their play, screaming at Vogel and the coaching staff and anybody watching, this is how the offense should go. The offense should be run through me because look how good I'm doing when I get those reps. I don't think anybody earned it. I think you could make the case here, if you're talking about the offense, that introducing the element of Nurkic and the specific way that you have to utilize him as somewhat of a playmaking guy for you so late in the offseason hampered you. I could hear that. But at the same time, the other late addition was Grayson Allen. Does he have as much value, a guy you just paid, if the offense is a little less balanced and a little more tilted toward the stars? I don't think there's an easy answer. But I think the numbers tell us the peaks that this team reached and the overall talent tells you that the alternative, which would be trading one of these guys and hoping you can get something back, is probably not going to be effective enough to be better than keeping them. These guys showed us enough to give you hope that they can, if they are able to stay healthy, more, even a little bit more than last year. They can win a lot of games, put themselves in decent seeding position, avoid the play-in, everything else, to be a contender in the Western Conference. I believe that. So let's talk about how to maximize them. And I'll give you a little bit more of my thoughts on, could you maximize two of them by trading one of them? We'll get into all of that coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by DoorDash. It's Mother's Day coming up here soon, and get something thoughtful for your mom on DoorDash. Might not seem like the place to go, but it is. Surprise her from wherever you are with fresh bouquets, the latest tech, gift cards, self-care treats, and more to make her day that much better. Pair flowers with the gift card so she can celebrate any way she wants. Maybe she's a bookworm. Try a gift card to a bookstore. Does she love a good latte? Well, try a gift card to her favorite coffee shop. You can't go wrong. Whether it is physical items, gift cards, wherever, whatever, treat her nice. Get her what she wants. Get her what she loves. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place. And get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend at least $15 on that next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's code LOCKEDONNBA. Again, all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place. 50% off your next order up to $15 when you use the code LOCKEDONNBA on your next $15 or more order. Order using DoorDash today. Promo code LOCKEDONNBA. Terms apply. Keeping the show rolling. The Suns have an alternative here, aside from build around the big three better, right? That is, it's not impossible, and a lot of the conversation here on Monday from national media and everything else is centered on this option, which is bail on it altogether. Become like what the Wolves have done and have more of a big two, at least salary-wise, and then Ant will get very expensive here soon, and they'll be in their own set of questions. Build like Dallas did, right? With Luka and Kyrie, the very clear offensive creators who are paid a lot of money, and the rest is supplementary pieces. There's numerous examples like that. Obviously, Bucks, the Sixers, even the Knicks with Randall, on down the line. Do that. Trade one of them. I will repeat. To me, there is no version of trading any one of the big three players on the Suns that makes you a better team. There's no version of it. Teams who want those players aren't going to give up other good players for them, because then their team is probably netting out to be even, just like the Suns would ideally be trying to net out even or better. The only way to get real value in return involves a lot of draft picks, and draft picks are not helping you win a championship during Devin Booker's Supermax or during the rest of Kevin Durant's prime years here. There's no version of those trades that make the Suns a better team. And if the goal is to be a better team, to me, it has to be improving around those three guys. However, with that being said, and the understanding being that unless Booker asks out or Durant asks out or Beal says, I want to go here and I'll waive my no-trade clause, this will only work. This trio, leading a championship caliber team, will only work if these guys do some of the things that stars do not typically do. If you're not going to have a bevy of role players who can step in and fill in on the margins and in the holes of this team, the star players on this team need to do it. Bradley Beal, needs to be a more aggressive three-point shooter, needs to get to the basket and take at-rim shots more often. He already did a good deal of sacrificing and adjusting to become this team's primary point-of-attack defender, and he deserves a lot of praise for that. He will need to continue to do that. Devin Booker, I think, he needs to embrace the playmaking responsibility himself at a more consistent rate. He, as he did at times this season, needs to embrace taking more threes, being a defensive communicator the way that he was at portions of this season, and definitely being a more consistent, overall impactful defender no matter what role he's playing, whether that's a team defensive guy or an on-ball player. Kevin Durant needs to help this team solve its rebounding issues, needs to be another line of rim protection more consistently and an overall impactful turnover-creating team defender. It's nice when he took on those matchups in January and February, guarding Kawhi, guarding Luka, guarding whoever. I don't think that's really the role you want, right? He's an older player. He's not a huge physically strong guy compared to other options. I think, to me, Durant is a rim protector, a steal generator, and everything else. He also probably needs to also take more threes like the whole team does. So with that said, part of this is continuity, right? If you're talking about maximizing this team. And that's been the message from all of the players and Vogel basically since it became clear, hey, this isn't looking too good, right? So what could continuity do? I think you would hope it solves or improves at least the turnover issues, the fourth quarter issues that plagued this team and put them in holes where I think it was Grayson Allen who referenced, a dozen or more games this year where they all sort of felt like, damn, we really let that one go. We really, screwed the pooch there. Is that even the right phrase? I don't know. I'm going to use it. I think that continuity would help that. It would also, from a team building standpoint, gives you another offseason to get role players who fit better, right? And you have a body of evidence now of what works and doesn't work, okay? You probably need everybody who's going to be on the court to be able to shoot. I think it's probably true of every NBA team. I think that probably is where you start. We'll go down that rabbit hole in the next segment more, but you get players who are going to maximize and support the big three better. That's an easy way to make them to lift the floor and the ceiling of this team. You get a full training camp along the same lines, right? Nurkic and Grayson integrated, actually getting time to practice and get reps and institute a new scheme or adjustments to the scheme. Hopefully Bradley Beal's more healthy. All that type of stuff. You also get a full offseason of the stars working on the aspects of their game that they need to improve. Bradley Beal going in knowing, wow, I really actually need to be the full-time point-of-attack defender on this team as far as we know right now, before any moves have been made in the offseason. I'm going to get to work on that. Finishing at the basket. Drive and kick, keeping your dribble alive. Stuff we know he can do, but can you polish it? Can you get even better with it? Booker, watching film, getting more comfortable with the quick decisions he needed to make where you would just see him freeze at times. I think there's obviously all those little areas that they would get better at. And it's not unforeseen or unexpected that continuity and time would help. One, as the players have said, like failing together, going through the emotion, being able to come out of that and lean on each other and learn from it, that does matter. I mean, anybody who's ever done anything with anybody could tell you that it is helpful when you have a certain level of trust and understanding and mutual agreement and compromise going on with the people around you. The Heatles, notoriously, right? Big three Heat, losing the finals. The KD Warriors, they were great, hit the ground running, won a championship in year one, but they were even better in year two. The LeBron James Cavaliers, they had some injuries, but Kevin Love in particular, I think, was not a great fit. They obviously fire their coach, and they make some adjustments and tweaks and get better. Kevin Durant with the Nets. I tweeted this stat out. It's very interesting. The first regular season together after Harden gets to Brooklyn, the rest of that year, those three guys, Durant, Irving, and Harden, had a plus 6.7 net rating together in the regular season that year. That's the same net rating the Suns guys had this year. Now, they only played 23 total minutes together the following season because Irving wouldn't get vaccinated. Harden asks out. Durant had an injury, and the rest was history. But the point is, even the greatest of great teams with stars that are frankly better than the Sun stars and in their prime much more than the Sun stars needed time to gel, needed that next season to get to yet another level, and it would not be surprising if that naturally just plays out here. That said, what are the priorities in the offseason at the most macro level? In terms of the coaching staff, in terms of the personnel, with that body of evidence, and with the understanding that the Suns' probably best course of action is to keep the big three intact, what is that all going to look like? What should it look like? We'll get into that coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose straight to your account. I am looking at the NBA odds. Maybe you're ready to turn the page on the NBA completely, but if you're a basketball lover like me, I know you're watching, and we have on Tuesday night Sixers, Knicks, back at MSG. The Knicks are only 4-point favorites at home. I feel like that's an interesting one. I might lean a little bit there. And the Cavs, do they have something? They're favorites by even more than that at home, but I feel like the Magic have the advantage there. Much more. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's close out the show, all right? So, okay, priorities. What's the best approach given everything we've talked about? That you're probably not going to improve the team from where it's at now with the trade of the big three, and that we do have some evidence of what they're good and bad at. Well, let's start with the coaching staff. If the Suns fire Frank Vogel, which today at practice, Bradley Beal gave a quote about that, and basically similar to Durant last night with the whole, if I give context or perspective, then it comes across as an excuse, and I don't want to do that. Beal sort of had a similar approach with his answer about Vogel. He was asked point blank, do you want Vogel to be back? Do you think he should be back? And he basically said, Frank's a good coach, a good guy, championship, experience, and I don't want to comment on his future because I'll be sort of, it'll be used, or, he said, I don't like the bait you're giving me or whatever. So safe to say it's not set in stone. We also had a weird thing where Monday James Jones was supposed to speak, and that got pushed back to not Tuesday, but Wednesday, and he got a little partner in his press conference, which is Suns owner Matt Ishbia. So we don't know what that's going to be, but it's at least interesting to think about why that delay might happen. Ishbia was in town on Sunday for the game, so it's not like he needs to fly in from Michigan. I'm not sure what that delay would be. Like I said on Sunday after the game, I think the Suns will spend this week canvassing the league, calling around, seeing if they have people that could be interested in coming here to replace Vogel before they fire Vogel. I think you have to do that. That's the reasonable approach here before you make a rash decision and fire a solid coach, even if you don't think he's perfect. So if the Suns fire Vogel, what should the priority be? If we're talking priorities, I think it should be an experienced motivator who presses the right buttons. An experienced motivator who presses the right buttons. Meaning, to be more specific, somebody who's been here before. Okay? I'm off the new first-time guy. And I think the Suns won't even consider somebody like that. They're not going to call he got hired, but they're not going to call a Jordi Fernandez type again like they did last summer. If they didn't think if Ishbia didn't feel comfortable going into a do or die type of situation at the franchise level with an inexperienced coach with the first go round, I don't think after a failed playoff appearance, he's going to feel comfortable doing that now. So some names, just to get the wheels turning, because I know it's a little bit of a tease if I say something like that and I don't have any names, all right? Ty Lue, obviously. Mike D'Antoni, he's 72. Look, I don't even know if he's interested. I believe he's an advisor in New Orleans right now, working below fellow Suns alum David Griffin, who is the president of basketball operations over there. I don't know if D'Antoni even wants to coach anymore, and I'm not positive he'd be the best guy for the job, but I think at the very least he has experience in these situations and would be a solution on the offensive end, if nothing else, right? Jeff Van Gundy, again, older guy, not sure if he really wants to coach, also an advisor with the Celtics, but if you felt confident he had the right types of opinions about how a modern NBA team should look, given that he hasn't coached in 15 years, I think he would get respect and own that locker room in a way that might be valuable and different than what Vogel has been able to do, given some of the leaks we've heard. And then Sam Cassell I threw out there, never been a head coach, but he's basically been everything but. He's been a lead assistant on multiple great teams, well-respected veteran player before retiring in multiple different stops. I could see it. He's been on a lot of lists and interview cycles in the past few years. Okay, what if the Suns don't fire Vogel, but we know they need to replace Kevin Young? What should the priority be there? Because that's the guy who, for all intents and purposes, was coordinating the offense that players were unhappy with. So even though I think he's a respected guy and had the trust of Booker at the very least, it's sort of an opportunity to reset the top-level assistant in your staff, as well as just who is going to kind of oversee the offense and get some new ideas in there. To me, I think priority number one, go find someone else's well-respected assistant and give them a big raise. Like I think of Johnny Bryant in New York, who's put together a system that really has maximized Jalen Brunson. He was with Utah with Quinn Snyder prior to that, and those offenses were very well-renowned. That, to me, is a perfect example of where I would look. Guys like that. Matt Ishbia can give them. He doesn't have to pay Kevin Young anymore. We know he was making Kevin Young one of the highest paid assistants in the NBA. Give that salary or more to somebody who's the Kevin Young of another team. Or go the player development route and give maybe David Fizdale or Quentin Crawford or Miles Simon a little bit more responsibility. And we know the Suns need player development. Now, is that going to be the pitch when you're trying to win a championship? Maybe not. But I'm just throwing it in there. I have an opinion too. It's not all just, reading Matt Ishbia's mind. I think the Suns need to prioritize player development. So there you go. Little tuck that in there. Keep it in mind as we go through the offseason. Speaking of the offseason and the personnel side of things, the Suns need some kind of point guard option, okay? And I've said that throughout. I am not of the opinion they should be getting or pursuing or even thinking about a starting level small point guard. Like Fred VanVleet on this team, that would never have been possible, but somebody like that. I don't, like, if they had gotten TJ McConnell in the Ayton trade, maybe a better example, right? I don't think that guy should have been starting. But they need an option. They need somebody they can put out there in certain lineups, in certain moments, in certain situations, against certain matchups that has a point guard's mind, right? Maybe that's Kyle Lowry. I think he's fit in really well in Philly. That's, it's a home for him, and he's played for Nick Nurse in the past in Toronto, but maybe that could be somebody, right? Point of attack defense, for sure. There's numerous options out there. I'll throw Chris Dunn as one in Utah. He came back, rejuvenated his career. He's a free agent. A better backup center. There's multiple options there. And I think they have to take another upside wing flyer. They have to try for another Keita Bates-Diop this year and another Nasir Little. Now, he makes some more money. He was a trade guy, whereas they're really only going to have the minimum free agent route to go this year. But those are the 4 categories of player that I would be pursuing. Some of that can happen via trade. Maybe some of that could happen in the draft. It's not crazy to think a backup center type of player could be there at 22 if the Suns choose to pick. Will happen on the minimum market in free agency. Now the Suns have at their disposal, so they're going to have to get creative and look at all those avenues. But those are the 4 buckets of player that I think we know the Suns need. They do need a little bit more organization and control in their offense at times, even with the adjustments I think we will see heading into next year. Point of attack defense was a huge weakness all year long. They need a playable offensive player who can do that on the defensive end, somebody better on offense than Okogie to fill that role. Backup center, to me, I was screaming about it all offseason. I was sitting here telling you Belly Hernan Gomez, who I don't even think you probably knew the W is pronounced like a B in his name, that he should be a candidate in consideration because it was so glaringly obvious that a 6'8 dude who played with the Portland Trailblazers and the San Antonio Spurs and never played a meaningful game was not a good guy to bring in as the only backup center. I called that one. I hate to be right about bad things, but I was right. It was just a silly thing to do to only have 2 options at a big position in a conference that has Nikola Jokic in it, and apparently the Wolves now, And then the backup, the wing flyer, it's not going away. Their need for size at the forward spots is not going away. Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, wouldn't it have been nice to have more bodies that weren't Bradley Beal to put on those players and have a player who could match the physicality and intensity there, who, again, was playable on the offensive end. So there we go. Coaching, personnel, there's all sorts of changes that can and will happen, even though it feels like the Suns are out of moves. They're not. You got to get them right because there's not as much wiggle room, and there's pressure now. You just screwed it up. You had a full year and you accomplished nothing. Every move will matter more. And I get that that's why, you're thinking long and hard about the big ones at the same time. Trading one of those guys, firing Vogel. I get it. But I think this is the team. I think continuity will help. And I think there's some things they can do to get them a little closer. That'll wrap us up for the day. More to come throughout the week. Steven Perjone will continue his weekly check-ins, so keep an eye out for that to close out the week later on. More guests, more chatter, more news, of course, as the week continues. Press conference from Ishbia and Jones on Wednesday. So keep it right here. Become an everydayer. And I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.